we have some motions before us. France?
So Will was nice enough to help me rephrase the original motion into 3 motions.
Do you want to move your microphone around?
I could. Will is still nice, and he has still done the splitting of the motion into 3, and it goes as follows. I move that pursuant to Standing Order 110B, that Orange Air Ambulance produce all correspondence and documents relating to the suspension of Orange Rotor pilot Bruce Wade, and that these documents shall be produced by Tuesday, September 4, 2012.
Discussion? Yes, that's wrong.
Would it be friendly, or if not, I'll move it, produce all correspondence and document, including Bruce, this is the addition, including Bruce Wade's entire employment file, as well as complaints, incident reports, and minutes from meetings relating to the suspension, because that's just the catalog of related documents. So it does, I mean, I think you've already said all correspondence and documents, but that would be, make it clear that we're looking for the whole file.
I have no problem with this.
And I'll give you this. I'm not sure where you want to put it in, because we were amending the motion sight unseen. So I'm happy with wherever you make it make sense.
So it would now read, I move that pursuant to Standing Order 110B, that Orange Air Ambulance produce all correspondence and documents, including Bruce Wade's entire employment file, as well as all complaints, incident reports, and minutes from meetings relating to the suspension of Orange Rotor pilot Bruce Wade.
And that the documents shall be produced by September.
And that these documents shall be produced by Tuesday, September 4th, 2012.
Agreed. So
Agreed. All in favor, voting on the amendment?
Okay. And that's the motion as amended.
And for the motion as amended?
That's
Carried. Okay, we have a second motion. Ms. Jelinek.
I move that pursuant to Standing Order 110B, that Orange Rotor pilot Bruce Wade produce all correspondence and documents relating to his suspension at Orange Air Ambulance, and that these documents shall be produced by Tuesday, September 4, 2012.
And then again, if we could just, for further clarity, add in all correspondence, including email. So just add in including emails.
Including emails, okay. So it's an agreement to the amendment? Okay. All in favor of the amendment? And the motion as amended, all in favor? Carried. And the third motion, Ms. Jelinek.
Third one. I move that pursuant to Standing Order 110B, that Orange Air Ambulance produce their aircraft out-of-service report, and that these documents shall be produced by Tuesday, September 4th, 2012. I would be willing to say, to give it a time frame, so let's say from January 2012 till now.
Okay. And actually, that's what I was going to suggest, is that we put in a time frame. So for further clarity, that would be from January 2012 to August 2012.
Is there agreement on the amendment?
Yes.
Agreed. And now for the motion as amended, all in agreement? Carried. Okay. So our first witness of the afternoon is Mr. J. Lebo. If you could come forward, Mr. Lebo. And just to confirm that you received the letter for witness coming before the committee?
Yes, I did.
Very well, great. And our clerk shall do either an oath or affirmation.
Affirmation, please.
An affirmation? Okay. Mr. Lebo, do you solemnly affirm that the evidence you shall give to this committee touching the subject of the present inquiry shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Very well. If you want to take some time for an opening statement, please.
I have no opening remarks.
Okay, very well. Then we shall move to the opposition for questioning to begin with. Mr. Klees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lebo, welcome.
Thank you.
I would like to start off by asking you why you took the initiative to write this committee and volunteer to come forward with some witnesses. We've had difficulty getting them here, including the Premier himself. But could I ask why you took the initiative to write to us?
Sure. I wasn't eager to be here, but I've been following this committee's investigation into what happened at Ornge, and I've heard questions asked in this committee that weren't answered, and I felt that I had some of the answers, and so I felt an obligation to make myself known to the committee.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Could I ask you then to perhaps give us an idea of what some of those questions are? And if we could perhaps, as someone who was on the inside at Ornge, you have a sensitivity. Clearly, you knew what was going on there. You know the issues that this committee is interested in. What would the most important issue be that, as you were observing these proceedings, that your antenna went up and said, wait a minute, this is wrong, this is an important issue, I know what really happened? Could you share that with us?
Sure. I do want to make it clear that there are a lot of things of which I don't have any first-hand knowledge. There are a lot of things that have come out through this committee and through the media that are news to me. So I don't want to let anyone think that, I had some inside information, but I wasn't all-knowing. The reason that I reached out to the committee was really for a couple of questions in particular. Earlier on in this procedure, it seemed ambiguous as to whether or not money that had been intended for Ornge's operation had been used for personal gain. I think that's become decreasingly ambiguous, but it's not at all ambiguous to me, because I was paid from Ornge, always from Ornge, never from Ornge Peel or any other organization, and a great deal of my time was spent working on for-profit ventures that I later found out through the Toronto Star were benefiting primarily private shareholders. At the time, I believed those for-profit entities were going to flow 100% of their profits to the province. When I discovered through the media that in fact that was not the case, that's when it became clear to me that at the very least, if nothing else, at least a portion of my salary was used to pursue, avenues for private benefit.
We've heard testimony here that any dollar amount that may have been paid to Ornge employees through Ornge and they were doing work for-profits would be charged back. Can you share with us what insight you have as to whether or not that in fact took place?
I worked on a couple of consulting projects for third-party clients on behalf of the company, and when I was doing work that was being paid for by third parties, I logged my time so that the company could recoup it. But in my day-to-day activities, I was not keeping track of which hours were spent on, let's call it, provincial issues versus international expansion. I wasn't asked to keep a log for that.
And of course everyone at Ornge in the executive suite at least knew full well what your time was being focused on. Mm-hmm. And at no time were you ever asked to log that time so that it could be charged back. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
Okay. Could you just tell us, you indicated that you worked for a number of, or did work on behalf of a number of these for-profit entities. Can you give us some specifics on that?
Certainly. I'll back up a minute and say that I'm not a healthcare professional, and so my involvement in all of these projects, the projects that I'm about to tell you about, were of a project management and client relations nature. I was never the subject matter expert. But I worked on a project evaluating Bermuda Air Ambulance on behalf of an Ontario insurance company. I can't remember the name of that company, but a Canadian insurance company asked us to evaluate Bermuda Air Ambulance, which was one of their partners, and they asked us for our opinion on what kind of outfit Bermuda Air Ambulance was, and I project managed that. I worked on a consulting agreement to the province of Saskatchewan, and that was an evaluation of their air ambulance operation along with recommendations for the launch of a rotor wing program in Saskatchewan. And I was the project manager and lead author on that project. And finally, there was a consulting project to the government of Nunavut, which was similar to the Saskatchewan project but on a smaller scale. And I was the project manager and author for that agreement.
And who would have given you those specific assignments?
Dr. Mazza.
Dr. Mazza himself?
Yes.
I'd like to just follow up on the Saskatchewan report. Obviously, there are some media reports around that report. You yourself say that you were the lead author, and yet your name never appeared on that report. Could you tell us, first of all, why? And there was a biography in that report, and it named, I think, was it 4 or 5 individuals in-house at Orange. If you read the report, it talks about the team biographies.
Yes.
And one would conclude, and probably it was intended that one would conclude that the report was actually written by these well-experienced individuals. So help me to understand how it is that you were the lead author, your name didn't appear on the report at all, and from what I understand, the people whose names did appear had virtually or very little to do with the report itself.
I would disagree with the last part of your question there. The report is entirely the product of the opinions and analysis and recommendations of the people described in the back of the report. It was my job to take what they had to say and to compile it into a report that was fit for public consumption. Writing is one of my talents. It's probably not among the talents of the people listed at the back of the report, but they were the subject matter experts. So they made their observations, they made their recommendations and analysis, and I crafted the report. But everything in the report really comes from their minds, not from mine.
Do you recall what the value of that report was? What was the consulting fee that Saskatchewan paid to Orange?
I don't remember exactly what it was. It was, I believe, in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $120,000.
Okay, and that would have been paid to which of the companies?
Orange Peel, I assume.
While you were writing that report, who were you billing your time to?
I was being paid only by Orange, and I was logging my time so that my hours could then be billed to the client.
Okay, so for this particular report, it was charged back as far as you know?
That's my understanding,
Okay.
yes, sir.
I'd like to move on to another report, and that is the marketing agreement with Augusta-Westland. As the senior aide to the CEO, can you tell me, were you aware of that, of the discussions that were taking place between klees+Mazza and Augusta-Westland?
I was aware that there were discussions, yes.
Can you confirm for us some of the testimony that we have had here? Namely that the amount that was related to that marketing agreement, that it essentially was an overpayment of the contract for the helicopters that was signed between Augusta-Westland and Orange. Are you aware of that detail?
Not really, no. I was While I was there, I heard some talk about the weight upgrades that was discussed, within earshot of me. And I always knew that it was Dr. Mazza's intention to make Augusta a consulting client, but I knew of no other details. The details of the marketing agreement, I think, came after I had left the organization.
As a senior aide, you would be very close to discussions that Chris Mazza was having. This was a very important deal. Did you ever become privy to or overhear conversations relating to this? Was there ever any reason for you to have concern that something may not be quite right about this deal that was coming down?
No.
Okay. What was your response when you, and I'm assuming that you've been following these hearings?
Yes.
Particularly the last testimony we had from Mr. Beltzner as the chair of the board when he advised this committee that he was presented with a letter that gave him documentary proof of the fact that Orange was overpaying to the tune of some $6.7 million for those weight upgrades. You're aware of that testimony that was given?
Yes.
How did you react to that?
When I heard that testimony?
Yes. Did it surprise you?
Yes.
And I'd like to get your sense of who in that executive suite would have been aware of the details of that deal.
I can only speculate.
Yes.
Dr. Mazza and Maria Renzella.
I'd like to ask you to give some thought to your experience as a base manager, a very important role in an air ambulance organization. When you were appointed as the base manager, I think it was for the Toronto base, is
That's
that right?
Yes.
What experience did you have in helicopters, in EMS, in managing an emergency helicopter base?
I had no management experience in that area. In terms of my knowledge of air ambulance in general, it would be only what I had learned at Orange in the year and a few months prior to me taking on that role.
And how did you feel about being placed into that responsible position?
Well, I volunteered for it. I should make that clear. It seemed to me an unusual choice, but a good choice, given the circumstances at the time. I think it's important to realize that a regional operations manager at Orange is not part of the decision loop that actually helps the patients. So a regional operations manager is not at all involved in dispatching helicopters or in any real-time patient care sort of way. It's really a support role and conduit to improve communication between headquarters and the front line. So being a paramedic or having a strong healthcare background is not a job requirement for that position. At the time that I was given that position, I had been told that the position had been open for months and that there were no qualified applicants and that the region was in crisis. Now, at this time, I had been at Orange for about a year, and I was looking forward to a long career at Orange, and I felt that it would be beneficial to me to get some operational experience on the front line. Also at that time, the overarching strategic objective for Orange was operational excellence, and that's something I know quite a lot about from my business background. And the major challenge in Toronto was low morale, poor employee engagement, and poor trust between the front line and headquarters. And that's really a leadership function rather than a healthcare type of function. So I felt that given that nobody else would apply for this position, and given that the major objectives were about operational improvement and human capital management, I felt that I was a suitable choice, even though my qualifications were unusual for that role.
How long were you the operations manager there?
How long was I the operations
Yes.
manager? I officially became the operations manager in March of 2009. I was finishing up the Saskatchewan report at that time, so I wasn't able to devote 100% of my time to that role until about April 2009. And then I was terminated from the organization in January 2010.
Okay. During the period of time that you were the operations manager, was there ever a visit from the Ministry of Health in terms of an inspection, an on-site visit?
There was. I believe it was called a performance review, okay, where the government basically audited the operation, not the type of audit that the Auditor General does, but an audit of the healthcare provision side of the organization.
Did you ever get a call or were confronted, or were you ever alerted to any issues by paramedics or by pilots concerning perhaps issues such as understaffing? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I heard complaints about all kinds of things. If you want me to focus on understaffing.
Well, let's talk about the understaffing issue,
sure,
because we've heard a lot about that, and obviously that leads to incident reports that we've been dealing with here. So let's focus on this understaffing issue. Paramedics not available or pilots not available, so that Orange could not respond to calls.
Okay. In my time, there were never any issues of pilot availability. It was CHL was completely responsible for the aviation side, the rotor wing operation, and I never experienced firsthand any issues of pilots being unavailable. There were, it was a common occurrence for there to be only one paramedic on duty at a time, or for a paramedic who had called in sick to be backfilled with, let's say, a primary care paramedic, which I think you understand. If you've got a primary care paramedic partnered with a critical care paramedic, then as a team, they don't operate at a critical care level. So even though one paramedic knows what to do, they're not permitted as a team to do all of that if one of them is a primary care paramedic. So there were lots of complaints that came to me about why do I have to work alone, or why can I not work to the full breadth of my abilities because I've been partnered with someone whose qualifications are below my own.
Right. And of course we know that by regulation they're not allowed to work alone.
Yes.
And yet you're telling us that quite often that would be the case, which translates into the understaffing, which obviously translates into the incident reports that we've had review here, where a helicopter goes to a scene, the paramedic actually has to decline because they're not qualified to deal with that particular critical case. What did you, as an operations manager, then do, knowing that these circumstances were prevailing, knowing the implications to patient care? How did you respond to that?
Well, first, I took the issues to my superiors and made them aware of these complaints.
And your superiors at that time were?
At that time, for about the first half of my term in that role, my direct superior was Steve Farquhar, the Vice President of Operations. Later on, there was a new Director of Operations inserted between us. So when I started, there was no Director of Operations.
And who was that Director of Operations?
Sandra Burnside.
Okay. And how did they respond to your concern?
I haven't quite finished answering your previous question. So I brought these issues to my superiors, and I also, as regional operations manager, I made what efforts I could to improve staffing. I didn't have the authority to hire people, but I did what I could to reduce absenteeism and days off work due to workplace injury and that sort of thing. I'm sorry, could you repeat your next question, please?
When you brought these concerns to your superiors, how did they respond?
5 minutes, Mr. Klees.
Okay, thank you.
They acknowledged them. There wasn't any indication that anything would be done about it. The number of senior management had determined that every base gets X number of paramedics, and that really wasn't open to negotiation for me to say, but my base needs more.
Okay, so you made it very clear to your superiors that you were understaffed on the paramedic side. At the same time that you were understaffed at your base for paramedics, Orange was engaged in these international outreaches and was establishing these various beachheads, whether it's Brazil or Bermuda or wherever else. And while they were starving your base and probably others in the province of Ontario, a decision was made to divert funds to these international schemes, if I can put it that way.
It seems that way. I want to make it clear that in the time that I was there were no beachheads, so to speak. That came after my time. It's my understanding that there was an employee in Brazil, but that was after my time. When the time that I was there, everything was being done from headquarters in Toronto. And at the time, it was my understanding that these diversions were an investment in a new model that would generate revenue from outside the province to the benefit of Orange's stakeholders. So yes, I saw some money going towards these efforts, but I believed that there would ultimately be an enormous return on those investments for the people of Ontario.
So we had testimony here that the expertise that was being developed within Orange, the not-for-profit, was being used to develop strategies and competencies that would ultimately be seeded into these for-profit companies, and the shareholders of those for-profit companies would then benefit from that equity that's created in those companies. The amount that would be streamed back to the taxpayers of Ontario was something like 3%. Did you ever question that formula?
I only learned that formula from the Toronto Star. In my time at Orange, I had been told, everybody had been told, that 100% of the profits would flow to the province. There was never any talk of shareholders.
Okay, so you weren't aware that Mr. Mazza and others in that executive suite were actually the shareholders of these for-profit companies?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to Ms. Jelinek, the NDP.
I think I will continue on this before I go on with other questions that I have. So the plan, if it had worked, and the way it was explained to you, was really we would leverage this great thing that we had in Ontario with air ambulance, show the rest of the world how great we're doing. They would buy our knowledge, buy our technology, buy our competences. We would make money. And so who shared that vision, and how come you knew about it?
It was common knowledge that, you could have asked anybody at Orange, what is the CEO's vision, and that's what they would have articulated to you.
So this was shared broadly while you were there in 2009 and...
Absolutely, absolutely. When paramedics came to me, with questions about why are we diverting our attention, the answer I was instructed to give was, these are investments from which the people of Ontario will realize a return. The vision was that, Orange would one day be able to go to the Ministry of Health and say, we don't need your money anymore. We're self-sufficient. We'll continue meeting our performance agreement obligations, but you can cut our budget to zero. That seemed like a terrific vision. I was proud to be part of that.
And it was presented to you and the rest of the people at Orange in a way where you believed in it and worked in it and really thought that that was achievable?
Yes.
And when you were terminated, had you changed your mind about the vision?
No, I still think that the vision as it was articulated to me at the time is a good one.
Okay, that it could have worked. Why do you figure it didn't?
It appears as though somewhere along the way, the senior executives decided to keep the money.
Okay. From the time that you spent at Orange, you've already shared with us that everybody knew what the vision. So everybody knew that there were people divesting some of their time, their energy, their effort in Saskatchewan, in Bermuda, in Brazil, etc., etc. Would the people at the ministry had been aware of the vision?
It was my understanding that they were aware of the vision, but I had no first-hand knowledge of any communication between the ministry and the organization.
When you were executive to klees+Mazza, you never saw anything where Dr. Mazza tried to communicate with the ministry or that the ministry tried to communicate with Orange?
I was aware that meetings took place. I would observe executives talking to each other about some upcoming meeting or following up on some question, but I wasn't privy to details.
Okay, but you knew that meetings were taking place between the executive at Orange and the people at the ministry?
Yes.
Were any of those meetings ever at Orange sites?
I don't think so, no.
They were mainly at the ministry?
Yes. In fact, I think that Dr. Mazza didn't want anyone from the ministry to see the office.
Why is that?
It was expensive.
Oh. And it looked expensive, and it was?
Yes.
And why do you figure he didn't want ministry to see that?
That might have raised questions that he would prefer not to answer. It would seem to me that that would have raised questions that Dr. Mazza would have preferred not to answer.
As to being too lavish and being on the taxpayer's dime?
Yes. At some stage, he also said that paramedics were no longer welcome at head office, at least not without an escort.
What about the office was so lavish or was so that would have raised those concerns, you think? In detail, I guess. By the standards of private organizations, it wasn't lavish. I mean, there were no marble fountains or anything like that. But it was a nice office I don't know what the dollar value was, but I know that a lot of money had been spent on renovations, and it showed. Okay. You had indicated that you knew that there was meetings that they took place not at the office. How were you aware of those meetings?
I observed the daily meeting of the executive management team, and when there were meetings coming up, that was mentioned at the table. So I was there when those meetings were discussed. Although I want to say that as far as I can recall, the details of the content of those meetings was never discussed in great detail in front of me. Yes.
Okay.
So the vision that we are going to develop all of those for-profit, we are going to go outside of Ontario and Canada, was broadly shared with everybody from frontline staff on, everybody knew. Would you figure there would have been any way of keeping this a secret from the ministry?
I couldn't say. As far as I know, there was no intention to keep it a secret. It wasn't a secret. There were plenty of secrets at Orange. This was not one of them. I don't know how to answer that.
What were some of the secrets at Orange?
See,
I'll put you on the spot.
You're testing my memory now. You're putting me on the spot. I guess, the nature of Dr. Mazza's relationship with Ms. Long, The details about this marketing agreement, I expect would have happened behind closed doors. What's come out in the media about 3% of the profits flowing to the province as opposed to the 100%. I don't know if any of that was ever shared. I've been out of the organization for more than 2 years, so it's, for all I know, some of these secrets ceased to be secret after I left. But the executive team was certainly secretive.
The Minister of Health said that she tried to get meetings with Dr. Mazza, but couldn't get through to the man. To your knowledge, was Dr. Mazza or the executive at Orange trying to avoid the ministry?
Not to my knowledge.
No.
But I know that they were very careful about what they disclosed to the ministry.
Okay.
I don't know that they intended to avoid the ministry, but I do know that they were very selective in what they disclosed to the ministry.
Thank you.
So would you think it out of the ordinary that if the ministry calls, that they don't make themselves available, that they refuse to meet with her?
That seems strange to me. Dr. Mazza presents well. He's very persuasive, and I never saw him shy away from an opportunity to win someone over.
So your best bet is that if the minister calls, he puts on the best show he can put out.
That's my best bet, but I'm speculating.
Yeah, that's okay. We were not there either. You were closer than us.
In 2008 to 2009, your role was executive aide.
That's right.
Directly to Mr. Mazza,
yes.
To Dr. Mazza, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
During that time, do you recall Dr. Mazza ever asking you to try to schedule meetings with the minister or attempting to set up meetings with the minister?
No, I wasn't responsible for Dr. Mazza's scheduling. He had someone else for that.
Who was involved in his scheduling, or who was responsible for that?
His personal assistant.
Okay. At that time, who was it?
Lena Paolucci.
Okay.
So what were your responsibility as an executive aide? What does that mean anyway?
That's a good question. I say that because I was never really happy with the title. I never felt that the title described what I did, but it was the best we could come up with. My role was essentially business analysis. Dr. Mazza recently got an MBA himself. And as far as I know, he was the only person in the organization with an MBA. He had this vision to launch these for-profit activities, and he wanted someone with a business education to help him strategize and plan that, and also to act as a sort of ad hoc internal consultant, helping whomever needed help in the organization to infuse some business rigor into what they were doing. Okay.
Except for the 3 contracts you've talked to us, the one for Bermuda, Saskatchewan, and Nunavut, did you do any other work that toward the international side of the business?
Yes, a lot of research and analysis and strategizing about, potential opportunities. So, all the work, that precedes launching something. That's, when I began, Dr. Mazza knew that he wanted to generate revenue in a number of different ways, and he had lots of ideas about how that might be done, but none of these ideas were concrete. So part of my role was to put some meat on the bones and help him identify the best opportunities.
Did you identify any? Was there any good leads out there?
Well, it wasn't my job to look for leads. It was my job to figure out how Orange's strengths could best be commercialized. Yes, it seemed to me that there were lots of opportunities to commercialize Orange's intellectual property.
And this is what you were hired to do. Did you ever have a chance to do this? Did you ever?
No.
No?
No, nothing was ever executed while I was there.
You mentioned that some of the paramedics came to you and asked, why the shift, why the priority shift, and what was that about? Why were they asking that question?
Okay. Why were they asking that question?
Right. You said, there was a vision. The vision was that the for-profits would create revenue that would eventually flow back into the organizations with a view to having 100% funding, self-sufficient, not needing the ministry for funding. And paramedics you mentioned something to the effect of, I don't know if I'm quoting you exactly, but they would approach you saying, why are our priorities changing?
Yes.
What would be the reason why they were asking that? There must have been something that went on in the organization that prompted them to ask this question.
Sure. Well, the rationale for the vision, I hope I'm going to answer your question correctly. You'll let me know if I don't. The rationale for this new vision was, everyone had been told, was that demand for Ornge's operation was steadily increasing, and that the ministry had indicated that the organization could not expect commensurate increases in its budget year over year. So there was a gap between growing demand and growing budget, and that the only choices to the organization were either let that gap be and let some people do without the service, or fill that gap with revenue generated elsewhere. That's what I was told. That's what everyone was told. The Auditor General's report doesn't seem consistent with that.
Okay. And so I take it that at some point, that because this for-profit, to address this potential gap that was perceived, or that the management was warning people about, that there was a priority shift in terms of what paramedics were doing in terms of their actual employment. Were they doing less, primary care work, and then they were starting to do more for-profit work? Is that...
No, not at all. The day-to-day duties of paramedics never changed. All of what we're talking about, you would have seen changes at head office, but not on the front line.
Okay.
The front line may have felt that their superiors were distracted, but the job duties of the paramedics didn't change.
So the ministry laid down the cards that we know that demand for your services are going to grow, your budget is not going to grow, you're on your own to try to fill that gap, and this is why you did the business analysis, and this is why Ornge did the best it could to try to find business elsewhere so that they could continue to fully meet the needs of the people of Ontario. That was what you were operating under?
Yes, that's right.
Had the ministry come at any time and said, no, I don't think this private venture is working anymore, we want you to live within your means, would the vision have changed?
It would have had to.
It would have had to?
Yes. That's incompatible with what was happening. So if that's what if the organization had been directed to stop that, that would have necessarily changed the vision.
So that kind of confirmed my question that I asked you earlier. Was the vision shared by the ministry? Not only was it shared, but it came from the ministry that you were responsible for fully meeting the needs of the people of Ontario, but you were not fully funded to meet those needs.
Well, to be fair, I'm very confused myself about all this. I was told that demand was increasing steadily and that the budget was staying flat. The Auditor General's report suggests the opposite, that the budget was increasing steadily and that demand was flat. It would seem to me that what I was told wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
And where was that? What was the source of that? Was that directly from Dr. Mazza? Or was it
yes.
That this issue of the gap was something that was told to you directly by Dr. Mazza?
Yes. Yes, and anyone who was in a management position was also instructed to disseminate this.
So it would be the same thing with Mr. Farquhar, who, if you went to him and say, I have issue, you didn't even have an opportunity to ask for more medics to work within your base because this was the way it had been allocated, but he would also agree with the fact that we have to do the best we can with the resources we have, and anything over and above, we have to self-fund.
Yes.
Okay. And so basically, the mission and the vision was well explained, it was well understood, and there were people dedicated within Orange to making sure that this vision was being implemented.
Yes.
And from your experience having worked there, had the ministry at any time said no, like it does to other transfer payment agency, you would have done what the ministry had told you to do?
That's my expectation. I mean, we've seen some evidence that Dr. Mazza and the board felt that they were beyond the ministry's influence in areas like that. I think there was a letter from the chairman to the ministry saying something along the lines of, we can do whatever we want. So I can't say for certain whether or not that would have stopped them. I don't know.
But from what had been shared with...
The Auditor General would like to clarify a point.
Just to clarify, what we said about the issue being about the demand going down, what we actually said was that Orange was saying that the number of flights, transports they were doing was gradually going up. We did some computer-based analysis and other analysis, and what we found is the number of actual transports was actually going down, not going up. But that could be different than demand, because you could get a situation where the number of land ambulance interfacility transfers was down, but that may have been, the demand may be going up, but if, for instance, the hospitals were saying, we're not getting timely transport from Orange, they get somebody else. So just a clarification.
That's fair. Thank you. And everybody knows about the demographic shift that's happening, in the Western world. So I think it's reasonable to expect that demand for health care is going to go up as the population ages. You don't have to be a healthcare expert to understand that. But it seems to me from the Auditor General's report that the money was there for the asking, because it increased steadily every year.
Okay. So had it not been for what ended up on the front page of the Toronto Star, you would have left Orange thinking that the vision that had been put in place made sense, that what they were trying to do to leverage the knowledge and skills elsewhere to bring money in makes sense, that it was being supported by the ministry because the ministry was saying you will have to manage within your own means or go find your own means of financing increases because we are on tight budget. All of this all held together and made sense to you till it hit the front page of Toronto Star?
Yes.
And you have about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Is there anything that, in our questioning, that maybe perhaps we've missed that you think is important for us to know, that some areas that we should perhaps look into more, or areas of concern that you saw, looking at the hearings, or from what you've read in the newspapers, areas of concern that have not been touched by this committee yet?
No, I don't think so. I think you've done a pretty good job of, getting everything out there.
While you were at Orange, how much efforts were put into keeping salaries secret?
A lot.
A lot? And at what level was that happening?
The most senior levels.
So we're talking Maria Manzella, we're talking Dr.
The executive management team, including the CEO.
Yeah, Steve Farquhar. How far down did it go?
Not below the level of vice presidents. So the executive management team included anyone with a VP title, a COO title, and the CEO. So all of those people would have been privy to those discussions.
Okay, so within the executive team, the salaries were shared, but outside of the executive team, nobody knew?
I don't think I understand your question. Shared among the executives? I don't think that they shared their salaries with each other.
No, but they knew the salaries within the organization?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, maybe I'm still not understanding your question.
No, you're doing fine. I wanted to know how much efforts were put into keeping salaries secret. So you didn't know what the executive were making at Orange?
No. It was understood among the executives that the CEO wanted to keep executive compensation secret.
How is that known?
It was a regular topic of discussion at the executive management team meetings.
In what sense?
I can't recall specifics, but people saying, I don't want my salaries disclosed, or what can we do to avoid disclosing salaries, or how will this or that keep us off the sunshine list. I don't recall any efforts to keep the entire organization off the sunshine list. Plenty of paramedics and middle managers appear on the sunshine list, and as far as I know, senior management was never concerned with that. But certainly the executive management team understood that Dr. Mazza wanted executive salaries kept secret.
Okay. I'll save my 2 minutes.
Okay, very well. We'll move on to the government. Mr. Moridi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lebo, for appearing before this committee. Mr. Lebo, I see from your resume that you attended the Richard Ivey School of Business between the years of 2006 and 2007, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And your resume states that you attended University of Toronto between the years of 98 and 2000, 2 years.
Yes.
Did you do a degree program there? Or
I was pursuing a degree, but I didn't complete that degree.
Okay. And how did you get to a master's degree program without having a bachelor's degree?
The other parts of my application package were strong. I had international experience, entrepreneurial experience, a strong GMAT score, and I think that the admission team liked me. I was what they call a special admit. I was one of 2 people in that class who didn't have an undergraduate degree. But part of what I like about that school so much is that they take a holistic view of applicants and they make exceptions.
Okay, thank you. And you began working at Orange as executive aide to the CEO, Dr. Chris Mazza, in 2008. This committee has previously heard that the executives at Orange, they have the tendency to hire their friends and relatives and so on and so forth. How this position came about, that you got employed at Orange?
An HR manager at Orange reached out to me. At that time, I had never heard of Orange. I didn't know who they were. I got an email from someone in the HR department at Orange saying that they had found my resume in the Ivy resume book. The school publishes a book of resumes of recent graduates, that the CEO had specifically asked for a recent Ivy graduate, and that they had identified me as a potential candidate and invited me to apply for the position.
So you didn't have any personal dealing with Dr. Mazza or any executive?
Had never heard of them or the organization.
Okay. You worked as Dr. Mazza's executive aide between the years of 2008 and 2009 for about a year. Is that correct?
Yes.
And from there you moved to become the regional operations manager for the Greater Toronto area at Orange. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. How did this change in position came through?
It began in the back of a taxi with Steve Farquhar in Saskatoon. We were working on the Saskatchewan project together, and we were just making, conversation, and he mentioned his frustration with not having a manager in Toronto. He talked about how the region was in crisis, how he couldn't get anyone to apply for the job, and how between the operational challenges and the labor relations challenges, how he really needed a manager there. And I said to him, that sounds like a tremendous challenge and opportunity. And, given the right kind of support, that might be a challenge that I would like to take on.
Dr. Mazza has been characterized in many ways by people who came as a witness to this committee. He has been called, for example, inspiring, but also controlling, and even a monster. Another witness, actually, Mr. Tom Rothfels, described him as charming, but emotional, and explained that the organization was top-driven. These are the points some of the witnesses made to this committee. How would you describe Dr. Mazza and his management style?
I've been following these committee hearings, and I think all of the adjectives that you've heard are true. He is all of those things. I could add adjectives of my own if you'd like.
Yes,
but
please.
Okay. He is inspiring and charismatic. And deeply, intelligent and passionate. He is also controlling. I want to use the word paranoid, but not in a clinical sense, because I can't diagnose him. But fearful of a lot of things. Autocratic, volatile.
Okay.
I think that covers it.
Okay, thank you. Yes, in an article that appeared in the Star Phoenix, I guess this is the Saskatchewan paper.
Yes.
Right? On February 10, 2012.
Yes.
You were quoted as describing Orange as an autocratic organization.
Yes.
You already mentioned that he was an autocratic person, basically, Dr.
Yes.
Mazza. Now, what did you mean by that? Or what do you mean by that, autocratic?
It was his way or the highway. Dissent in the organization was not tolerated. You either did as you were told with a smile, or you were shown the door.
Were there any instances, in your view, of which you're aware of, Dr. Mazza rammed the initiative through, despite advice to contrary?
I'm sorry, could you please repeat that?
Yes. Were there any instances of which you were aware of where Dr. Mazza rammed the initiative through, despite advice to contrary? Any specific example of his being, for example, autocratic or...
The boat
Yes.
that we all know of. Now the boat was purchased before I arrived at Orange, but it was my understanding, not that he went ahead despite advice to the contrary, but that he went ahead unilaterally and announced one day that he had done this. There was another instance in which he announced during a meeting of the executive management team that he had sold Orange's hangar on the Toronto Island Airport to Porter. So I can't recall any instances where somebody said, "Don't do this," and then he went ahead and did it. But there were certainly times where he just went and did things, and there were other times where people expressed, let's say, more general concerns, not don't do this project, but rather just, we have a problem here, or I think that you should change this, people learned that your time at Orange would be short if you kept that up.
Okay. The Star Phoenix article, the same article actually, reports that you and several others at Orange were fired in the year of 2010 without any cause. Was this correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you are cited as saying that you frequently disagreed with them and they didn't like it. What did you disagree over?
A variety of things, but more than anything else, I disagreed with management's tactics. As I mentioned to Mr. Klees, the overarching strategic goal for the organization was operational excellence. And the biggest problem in my region in particular was trust, morale, and engagement. And I felt that senior management's style was making it impossible to achieve those objectives.
And who are this they in the article when you refer to they? Do you mean the senior management?
Yes.
Okay. Were any of the concerns you raised when you disagreed with them ever addressed your concerns? Did they ever address your concerns when you disagreed with them?
No, on the contrary. When I was terminated, I was informed that the reason for my termination was that it appeared to them as though I felt senior management lived in an ivory tower, and that that I dissented too much, and that I didn't fit in with the direction the organization was going. But that was an hour-long conversation. But the very first thing that was expressed to me after I was informed that my employment was being terminated was that, Jay, you seem to think we live in an ivory tower, and we don't understand why you feel that way.
So they simply ignored you, basically.
I would have preferred to be ignored. I was terminated.
Mr. Lebo, we touched very briefly on this issue earlier when I asked you whether you came to be employed at Orange due to any family or personal relationship. But I want to revisit this issue a little more because, as I explained, there seemed to have been a pattern at Orange for hiring friends and family members, etc., regardless of qualifications. One person who stood in this committee, Ms. Kelly Long, Dr. Mazza's girlfriend. Ms. Kelly Long was originally hired at Pathway Group and then seconded to Orange. And a few months later, Ms. Long was hired to work at Orange as a junior level communications officer. This was in December 2006, and she was earning $60,000 a year for that position. And then she quickly ascended to the ranks of Associate Vice President in 2011 with a salary of $120,000 a year. In just a few years, her salary doubled. When Dr. Mazza appeared before this committee, he maintained the view that Ms. Kelly was just a friend of his when she first started her work at Orange. Is this true? And if yes, when did Dr. Mazza and Ms. Long begin dating?
I don't know. I always knew that they were friends. That was not a secret. Okay. I didn't, when they became more than friends, I don't know. Okay.
Did it strike you as that this is odd that Dr. Mazza was dating with one of his much younger employees?
I didn't know that they were dating. Okay. I remember thinking that if they are dating, then this is not good. But I didn't know.
You were never. Dr. Mazza said that Ms. Kelly Long was smart, and her accession through the ranks was due to her ability and not to her status as his girlfriend. Do you agree with this statement?
No, intending no disrespect to Ms. Long, I don't agree with that statement.
Okay. In a few short years, Ms. Long went from making $60,000 to $120,000 a year. That's a lot of money, as you know. Do you believe that someone with Ms. Kelly Long's limited experience should have been making $120,000 a year?
No.
Thank you. It's my understanding, Mr. Lebo, that Ms. Kelly Long was originally hired by Pathway Group and then seconded to Orange because Dr. Mazza had another girlfriend at that time working at Orange. Do you have any knowledge of this?
No, I don't.
It has been reported in the media that Dr. Mazza earned a whopping $1.4 million per year salary in the year of 2011. In addition, he received loans from Orange to purchase his $1 million home and received medical stipend as well. Were you aware of Dr. Mazza's outrageous salary and benefits and no compensation?
I was aware of Dr. Mazza's compensation at that time, and at that time, in my opinion, it was not outrageous. It was not 1.4 million. It was under 500,000, as I understood it.
At that time?
Yes.
Do you think that Dr. Mazza deserved this type of compensation while working for a not-for-profit entity such as Orange, and not the organization received majority of its funding from the taxpayers' funds, from the government of Ontario?
If you're speaking of compensation of 1.4 million,
Yes,
no,
yes.
I don't think that's reasonable.
When Dr. Mazza appeared before this committee, he said that he regretted that his $1.4 million a year salary had become I'm just quoting him, saying that lightning rod for controversy. However, Dr. Mazza refused to acknowledge that his compensation package was in any way excessive, and repeatedly told this committee that he was not involved in setting up his own compensation. He said that my compensation was always the purview of my board of directors. I had no input into my compensation. I had no opinion that was ever. My opinion was never requested about my compensation. It's somehow bizarre that Dr. Mazza was unable to confirm his salary for the committee over the years, and tried basically to convince this committee that he had no input to his salary and to his compensation. Rather, he seemed to suggest that the board of directors simply set his salary and compensation without even him negotiating with them. During your time, your work at Orange and working for Dr. Mazza as his executive aide, were you ever aware of, or do you have any knowledge of any involvement of Dr. Mazza relating to establishing his compensation?
No. Dr. Mazza. Dr. Mazza worked hard to manage his board. It's hard for me to imagine that anything at the board happened without his influence, but I have no specific knowledge of what you're asking me about.
In your letter to this committee, where you offered basically to appear before the committee, you suggested that your salary during the year 2008 might represent a misuse of public funds for privilege gains. What did you mean by that?
That's what I was trying to explain to Mr. Klees, that a good deal of my time was spent researching for-profit opportunities. I was always paid out of the Orange operational budget. So when I found out through the media that 97% of this profit was going to the senior executives and board members, that's when it occurred to me that when I thought that I was working for the benefit of the people of Ontario, it now appears as though I was working for their personal benefit. That's what I meant by that.
It must be hard on you to have that kind of feeling at that moment.
I have lots of feelings about all of this. That's not one of the dominating ones.
While you were an employee at Orange, Mr. Lebo, what was your salary at that time?
As executive aide to Dr. Mazza, my base salary was $75,000.
Was this the starting salary when you started working there?
That was a guaranteed base salary, okay, with an opportunity to earn up to, I think, up to 20% more, if I recall correctly. My total compensation for the year, including bonus, was slightly less than $100,000. As regional operations manager, I made about 10,000 more than that.
So when you left, or you were fired, basically,
Yes.
your salary and compensation total would have been over $100,000 or $110,000.
I think it was a smidge under 100,000, including all bonuses.
Okay. You also wrote to the committee that you were under the impression while working at Orange that for-profit ventures were donating 100% of their income to of their profits. Do you still think that this was the case?
No, I don't. No.
Do you have any reason to believe that the money was not being given back to Orange, not for profit?
It's only what I've read, reading the Auditor General's report and reading the reports in the media. That's how I came to understand that 97% of the money was destined for the individual shareholders.
Thank you. In your resume, Mr. Lebo, you stated that you provided strategic advice and tactical analysis for securing new sources of revenue and promoting the Orange brand. How did Dr. Mazza describe this vision to you?
Which vision do you mean exactly?
The vision, I mean, your job basically at Orange, saying that you were providing strategic advice and tactical analysis for securing new sources of revenue for Orange and promoting Orange brand. I guess you had a conversation with Dr. Mazza.
Yes.
How did he convey his vision to you?
He felt
so that you can develop this kind of strategies and tactics for the organization.
He felt that that Orange was a world leader in transport medicine, that it was the best organization of its kind, and that he referenced some other companies, Royal Flying Doctors of Australia, for example. You may have heard of them, and if you have heard of them, it's remarkable that you've heard of them because they're in Australia. And he wanted a similar global reputation for Orange, and felt that if that could be achieved, it could be very lucrative.
And that was basically your job, to develop such strategies and tactics.
Well, my job was to to research the opportunities and to make the CEO aware of them and to make my recommendations when asked.
Okay. Thank you. Between the year of 2006 and 2011, Orange established a series of affiliated corporations, as you know, some of which were not-for-profit, and many of them were for-profit corporations. I'm not going to name all of them, but the list includes Orange Peel, Orange Issuer Trust, and Orange Global Air Inc. Were you involved in these initiatives?
No, I observed them, but I wasn't involved.
Were you aware that Dr. Mazza's salary used to be disclosed on the annual basis on Sunshine List? But in the year of 2008, when Dr. Mazza's employment was transferred from not-for-profit Orange to Orange Peel, his name ceased to appear on the Sunshine List. Was there ever any discussion around using the for-profit entities at Orange to shield executives' compensations from having disclosed their salaries at Sunshine List?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Could you tell us about it? The conversation that you were aware of.
Sure. We're now going back more than 3 years, and I don't recall the specifics of the conversations, but certainly at the executive management team meetings, it was discussed that by moving us onto meaning the executives, by moving the executives onto the payroll of the for-profit companies, they could be removed from the Sunshine List, and that would be good.
So that was an explicit
Yes.
conversation that you overheard?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very well. We'll move on to the To the opposition.
Yes, Governor.
You have 2 minutes, and then we'll have 2 minutes
Mr.
for the
Lebo,
NDP, and then you have 2 minutes.
In the
as well.
time that you were associated with Mr. Mazza, do you recall any meetings that he would have had with the Premier?
No.
Any meetings that he might have had with the Minister of Health?
Yes. I recall that he had a meeting with Minister Smitherman. I don't think I remember anything more than that.
No details about that?
No, I know that it was, I believe it was over dinner. I'm sorry, I don't remember anything more about that.
You're familiar with the...
Excuse me, Mr. Klees.
Yes.
I think when Mr. Smitherman was succeeded by Minister Kaplan, I believe that there was also a meeting during which Chris wanted to introduce himself to the new minister, and I think that happened.
So you would have had a meeting with Minister Kaplan?
Yes.
As well. You're familiar with the Myers-Norris-Penny audit?
Yes.
Fairly extensive audit. Were you involved in that audit at all?
I wasn't involved in the audit. I was. It depends what you call involved. I was asked to make some. There were a few occasions where someone would come to me and say the auditor is asking for this. Can you help us with that?
Were you ever instructed to give false information to the auditors?
I was instructed to create false information for the auditors.
And who would have instructed you to create that false information?
Dr. Mazza and Maria Renzella.
What was the nature of the information, to the best of your recollection, that they were trying to falsify?
To the best of my recollection, the auditors were asking for the business justification for a number of expenses, and I was asked to write the business justifications and to backdate them.
And did you do that?
I wrote the business justifications, but I did not backdate them. I put the correct dates on them.
I'm sorry you're out of time, Mr. Klees, so we'll move to the NDP.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, so the auditors are in there. Basically, what Dr. Mazza is asking you to do is illegal. You don't backdate document, so you wrote them up, but you didn't. But you put the actual dates on it.
That's what I recall. Yeah, that's the best of my recollection.
Okay, so here we have Dr. Mazza asking you to do something specific, and you're not doing what he wants. I expect you on the door the same night, but you're still there. You stayed there after not following his order.
Yes.
How did it go?
It was never mentioned again. When I delivered the documents to Ms. Renzella, they were, in the form of an electronic Word document. If she wanted the date changed, she could have done so herself without coming back to me.
Do you figure that's what happened?
At the time, I didn't expect that would happen. I know more now than I did then. In retrospect, for them to do that would seem consistent with a pattern of behavior. At the time, it seemed implausible that they would actually go through with that.
Was this the first and only time you were asked to do something that was morally wrong or illegal?
It was the only time I was asked to do something illegal. It was not the only time I was asked to do something morally wrong.
Give me an example.
The examples would have come from my time as regional operations manager, where I actually had responsibility for doing things. I was instructed to lie to paramedics.
About what?
About what? One example I can give is that during that year, the organization's budget for paramedic overtime had been far exceeded. It was, something like 50% beyond what it was supposed to be, and there were still some months left in the year. the collective bargaining agreement between the CAW representing the medics and the organization specifically said that paramedics' vacation could only be denied on the grounds of operational requirements, quote unquote. I and my fellow regional operations managers were instructed to deny vacations to mitigate the hemorrhaging of the overtime budget, but if asked why we were denying vacation, we were instructed to say it was for operational requirements.
And we must move to the government now. Go ahead, Ms. Sandals.
Were there other examples? You said that the backdating of documents was the only thing that you were asked to do, which was illegal. Were there other things you were asked to do which were morally wrong?
I was instructed to terminate people where I felt that doing so was morally wrong.
Why? Can you... I mean, we don't need names, but
Sure.
give us a sense of why.
Sure. I was instructed to terminate one person who had done nothing wrong at all, but, by virtue of where he lived, it's hard to explain. Having this person on the payroll was more expensive than having some other person on the payroll who lived in a more convenient place, and he was terminated. I was instructed to terminate him for that reason, even though the collective bargaining agreement is very specific about what are permissible terms for termination, and this is not one of them. You can't terminate an employee. You can't terminate a unionized employee who's done nothing wrong, and that was precisely what I was instructed to do. There was another paramedic whom I was instructed to terminate, even though I felt that this person needed help. Was facing challenges that I wasn't qualified to diagnose, but that terminating this person was neither in the organization's interest nor in his interest. I did not feel right about doing that. I objected repeatedly and was ultimately given a flat-out order, do this today.
So he goes or you go?
Yes, and I went anyway, about 2 weeks later.
Thank you.
We are out of time, so thank you very much, Mr. Lebo, for coming in.
Thank you.
Our next witness is Mr. Paul Eric Binderup, Senior Pilot Fixed Wing Operations from Orange. If you could come up, please. Welcome. And just to confirm that you have received a letter for witness coming before the committee?
Yes.
Very well. And our
Bible's in
clerk
front of
has an oath for you.
So the Bible's in front of you there, Mr. Binderup.
Sorry.
Thanks. So, Mr. Binderup, do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give to this committee touching the subject of the present inquiry to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
So help me God.
Thank you.
So if you'd like to make a short opening statement, you're welcome to. And then we'll move to questioning after that.
Well, thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Paul Eric Binderup, and I am one of the fixed-wing pilots who operate the PC-12 aircraft for Orange, based in Thunder Bay. When I was asked to come and appear before this committee, I spent countless hours, mostly while I was trying to sleep, considering what I could possibly add to the extensive testimony that has already been given in an effort to get to the bottom of the current state that Orange finds itself in. I debated what words of wisdom that I might be able to impart that would convince everyone to get along and get down to fixing what needs to be fixed. However, I realized that would require more than a few clever words. Then I thought that I should perhaps arm myself with statistics and information that might make me seem wise. I didn't think on that one too long. Or perhaps I should watch as much testimony as I could, and then I could pick all of the good stuff that might help further my agenda. That's when it dawned on me that I wasn't even really sure what my agenda was. On July the 28th, I sent a letter to the members of this committee with the support of many of my fixed-wing colleagues to say that I stand behind Orange and that I wanted to see it succeed. I still stand behind that statement. In the weeks following, it became very apparent that I underestimated the biggest problem Orange has to overcome, and that is lack of trust. not only the public's trust in us, but also our trust in each other and in Orange management. I've been fortunate in my 3+ years at Orange to work with some very dedicated individuals, not only fixed-wing pilots, but paramedics and helicopter pilots who have devoted their lives to the goal of serving the people of Ontario. And I owe it to them to show them the respect that they deserve, something that my previous letter neglected to do. For many of these people, it's more than a job, it's a calling. The fixed-wing pilots are considered the new kids on the block, but many of us hold this model of dedication up as something to aspire to. When Orange announced in 2009 that it would be starting a fixed-wing division, there were many of us that jumped at the opportunity to be a part of something special. So now here we are, in the middle of quite an awful mess, to be honest. There have been political lines drawn in the sand, personal lines drawn in the sand, and some pretty incredible rifts formed right on the front lines. The very people who should be unified in one purpose are now fractured. Many employees, including myself, have felt forced to pick sides, and in doing so ran the risk of alienating those with different views, only serving to deepen those rifts. Right now, Orange is dealing with some very serious issues. No one, including myself, is arguing that those issues don't exist. Let's be honest. We need more paramedics. We need more pilots, specifically rotor pilots. I'm sure that there are many other issues needing to be dealt with, but these things, in my opinion, are not insurmountable. They can be fixed. It wasn't that long ago that there were many people in this organization that didn't think there would ever be a chance that the top management would ever be held accountable for mismanaging Orange. Well, we know how that worked out. So now the new Orange management is faced with the daunting task of trying to sort out all these issues, while at the same time dealing with a rash of new issues that arise. But change is happening. So now what? Well, it turns out I found my agenda. My agenda is the people that work for Orange. It's why I came to Orange in the first place. I still feel that Orange, with all of its issues, can be fixed. It's going to take a whole lot of work by a whole lot of people, but at the heart of it all, we need to be able to trust each other. The new Orange management needs to be purposeful in establishing an atmosphere of trust, not only with the company, but also with the people of Ontario. I, for my part, feel bad that I lost some of the trust and respect of some of my colleagues by picking a side. I can only pledge to do exactly what I am encouraging others to do, and that is to work even harder to fix what problems I can, and hopefully gain that trust back. Certainly the people of Ontario deserve no less. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to the NDP for the first questioning. Ms. Gillens?
Sure. Before I start with my question, I'm sort of curious to know a little bit more. You seem like very, how can I say, moved by what happened since you picked a side and the lack of trust between some of the front line that work together. When you say pick a side, what are the sides?
Even within Orange, there are two very distinct camps. There are people that feel that Orange screwed up, that Orange messed up, they mismanaged the company to the point where Orange should be disbanded, shut down, however you want to word it, and that a new company or a different company should be given the opportunity to come in and do things right. Then there are those that feel that, yes, Orange messed up, but that there have been steps taken to rectify that over the course of the last 8 months. We still have a long way to go, but that these problems can be fixed, and that Orange should have the opportunity to fix them. With its new management structure, we've seen some of the steps taken towards that, or I have.
So there are people within the organization who still think that Orange should be disbanded?
Absolutely.
And it should be shut down?
Yes.
Are there many?
There are a vocal few. Some are more vocal than others. There are many that are just kind of watching to see what happens, kind of let it play out and hope for the best. And then there are a few on the other side that are actively trying to make things better. So I'd say on each camp there's maybe excuse me, a handful, half dozen to a dozen that are fairly vocal either way.
What would there be to win or to gain by dismantling Orange?
Well, if you think about it, I mean, everybody hates change. And this whole thing has really been about, in my opinion again, has been about change. If you look at the rotor wing pilots who worked for Canadian Helicopters for many, many years, some of them have been there countless years, and that job for them has become the pinnacle of their career. They worked with Orange, but not for Orange. And now that contract is no longer, and they're faced with numerous changes to their operation. Orange is doing things differently, perhaps with the same helicopter, but it's a different operation, and it has had to play by different rules. That change can be very difficult, for sure. Same for paramedics. Many of the paramedics that have worked for Orange and have seen many changes. Some of them worked for the Ministry of Health back before Orange was in operation. Mm-hmm. Saw Orange come in and saw the mismanagement happening. Some of them tried to raise concerns over the years that weren't listened to. But they saw all that change happening, and a lot of it for them was not for the better. So for them, there was actually, honestly, a collective cry of cheer when Dr. Mazza was fired. There were quite a number of paramedics that thought at that point, yay, our team won. On the fixed wing side, again, we're kind of the new kids on the block, so we haven't seen any of that change. We came in under the guise of thinking that Orange had it all together, and really all we had to go by, for the most part, was the paramedics and the rotor pilots that we would end up working with. So change is difficult for sure.
So from the time you were there, you had never heard of problems at Orange, of whistleblower coming to the government, of whistleblower coming to the opposition, of people thinking that something is wrong at Orange. Till it hit the front page of the paper, you had never heard of anything wrong?
No. There were memos. There was inside jokes, if you will, about Dr. Mazza and some of his memos. But for us, we came in at a time, 2009, summer of 2009. We came in at a time when a lot of this, I believe, I don't know the exact timeline, but a lot of this was just starting to really develop. The Orange Global came in the next summer, I believe. I don't know how long that had been in the works prior to that. Mm-hmm. So while there were always people that were quite vocal about the downside of Orange, it never really presented itself more than people that were vocal about the downside of Orange. The term whistleblower really never even popped up until the spring, when things really hit the fan.
So do you perceive that the committee work or any investigation into things that are not being properly handled at Orange by the management as an attack on the frontline workers?
No, not the committee. There's a perception that the lines are divided in the government circles, but not necessarily at the committee level. That doesn't really make sense. Let me try to explain. opposition has its duties to try and steer the government straight. Government is trying, I think, would try and do its best to lead the people of Ontario. This committee was set up, and this is my understanding at least, to really get down to the bare bones what went wrong at Orange. When it all became very apparent through the Star, Kevin Donovan. Oh, sorry.
Look towards you, just like this.
That better?
That's better.
Okay. When it all became very apparent what was actually going on, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was your question?
No, I can move on to another area.
The committee.
Yeah, just in general I mean, I don't want the frontline workers to think that by looking at what Orange did wrong or how Orange was mismanaged or how there was some oversight that was not done by the government perhaps, that none of that, I mean, I hope that the frontline workers don't think that that is in any way casting asperage on their work or on their, qualifications and on their quality of care.
No, we understand, and I can really only speak for myself to the most part, but we understand that there is a job to be done, that you guys need to get to the bottom of what happened. How else are we going to make sure that doesn't happen again?
Sure, that's exactly it.
Yeah, but no, the front line. I mean, we've had some disparaging things from the public through all of this, but the public is kind of funny that way. Sometimes they will latch on to negative things, and that can just as easily fizzle and go away. So you kind of roll with that, I guess.
Sure. Do you know Bruce Wade?
I do.
Do you have a personal? You know him personally?
I do.
And how would you describe your relationship with him?
Strained as of late.
Okay. Can you explain to me what an FOOR is?
An FOR is basically a flight operations occurrence report. Okay. It's our way of basically making the company known of just about anything that happens within Orange. That could be a delayed departure, it could be a declined trip due to weather, safety concerns, reports. It's tied very closely with our safety management system, so it's partly the safety system as well as just our way of tracking information in general.
And do I have it correct that you initiated or wrote up a FOR in regards to Mr. Wade?
I did.
And what was the basis of that FOR?
I don't want to get into, if I am allowed the latitude, I don't want to get into bashing of Mr. Wade any further than has already been done. For me, I initiated that process as a way to hold Mr. Wade accountable for his actions in the workplace. And that's strictly stemmed around the way that he carried himself at work, which, in my opinion, created a hostile work environment.
So it would be a personality thing as opposed to an actual, the way he was flying his aircraft or the way he was...
No, it had nothing to do with the way he was flying his aircraft.
Okay.
My worry would be that it would affect me in the way that I flew mine.
And how would it affect you?
Well, we're trained as pilots every year in terms of human factors, things that affect us from outside the cockpit, that could affect us inside the cockpit. Somebody going through a divorce, financial troubles. I mean, it could be anything, and so we're trained in that manner to recognize, or to at least try and recognize these things.
Sure.
And I felt that it was getting to the point where it was becoming what we would call a human factor.
I get a sense that you're somewhat of a leader amongst, perhaps maybe not officially, but definitely you have some leadership qualities. Is that how people look up to you in your organization?
I'm sorry?
Is that how people regard you in the organization?
I like to think I'm well respected, and I certainly get along with people that I work with for the most part.
And does that also apply then to upper levels of management, that you have a very good relationship with them as well?
I do. I try. We don't really have, in Thunder Bay, we don't have much contact with the management here in Toronto. Just geographical for the most part. Some by email and whatnot.
Who would your, in terms of upper management, who would your contact person be that you have?
My
close
direct
contact?
supervisor would be our chief pilot, Jim Bennett.
Sorry, who's that?
Our chief pilot, Jim Bennett,
Okay.
would be our my direct supervisor.
And then besides Mr. Baird, in terms of any contact here in Toronto, who would you have relationships with?
Beyond that
of
would
business?
probably be, right now, would be Jeff Garapi. He's our director of flight operations. He would be the next up the
ladder.
chain of command.
Sure.
Yeah.
I put a copy of an email that you sent out on July 27th. Do you recognize this email?
Yeah, sure do.
Okay. I will read some of it into the record later, but I want to first give you an opportunity to give me some context as to why would you write to all of the fixed-wing pilots from the people I was able to identify. Some of them I have not been able to identify. And what were you hoping to achieve, and did you achieve your goals?
I guess partly it was a twofold thing. As a group in Thunder Bay, and the Sioux Lookout and Timmins bases as well, we always have the opportunity to talk. And many of us had become very frustrated with what we perceived as being a very negative turn on Orange, both in the press and even within our own workplace and work environment. The negativity was really starting to beat us up, to be honest. Nobody knew. There was a pretty solid sentiment among the fixed wing pilots that we just didn't know what to do. Where do we go? What do we do? At that point, I guess my first thing that I did was I went to my union representative. I sent him an email and asked how we might go about filing a grievance, given the work environment that we were working in. The union indicated to me that it wouldn't be able to do anything. I'm not very well versed in union protocols, but same union, two different bargaining units. So it felt like the answer was, how does one bargaining unit complain against the other? And I didn't really have any reason to believe that wasn't the case, so I left that. I didn't pursue it through the union. My next avenue, I felt, was to send something through through our safety department in that respect, and that's where the original complaint actually came in. The other part of this was that, again, we were feeling a very negative sentiment in terms of how Orange was being portrayed. Some of it we didn't feel was fair. And the fixed-wing pilots really hadn't had a voice at that point. So that's when I drafted the letter to the committee on the 28th of July, I believe. So it was kind of the email itself was kind of twofold. It was to see, first of all, if there was support behind a move to actually draft a letter and send it. So this email went out prior to that letter. The issue with Mr. Wade was something that had happened prior to the letter as well. So it was kind of a separate issue, although the two are inexplicably united. The pilots that I spoke with and that I sent this email out indicated that they were behind that process. And so that's where we went forward with, or I went forward with the letter, and I believe there was an attached. I had sent as well some of the comments from the pilots to kind of indicate that support as well. We just felt that we hadn't had a voice up to that point, and it was important that somebody heard from a group of pilots that really kind of stood behind Orange and wanted to see it succeed.
There are lots of people who want Orange to succeed. I represent the fourth biggest riding in Northern Ontario. I depend, all of my constituents depend on Orange being there in their times of needs, because this is the way we get ambulance services for the people. There are a lot of people who want Orange to succeed, but we don't go about shutting down the people who are saying, well, things were not that good. You realize what has happened to Mr. Wade since you put the FOR forward?
Yes.
What has happened to Mr. Wade?
Since that time, Orange has hired an outside independent investigator to investigate the allegation. I'm not sure exactly how that process will end. I didn't really see that process starting to begin, to be honest. I thought that at some point there needed to be some accountability for his actions, and that was my goal, was that somebody would just say,
what
stop.
action do you figure he was not being held accountable for?
Mr. Wade, he's been described as a very passionate individual, but he comes across as angry and argumentative.
So you filed a FOR against him because he's angry?
No.
You filed a FOR against him because he's complaining about things?
I filed a FOR against him because of the way that
It's not acceptable to you that someone can complain about what's going on in the workplace?
Well, I know that you folks have protocols that you need to follow in Parliament. And if you go outside of those protocols, then you are held accountable. There are things that you can and can't do. And I felt that, in my opinion, Mr. Wade was creating an environment where...
How was he creating this environment?
Use of language.
Let him finish, please, Mr. Singh, and you have 3 minutes left.
Sure.
Use of language, being aggressive, argumentative, raised voice.
You're describing 50% of the pilots that I know?
That could be, but 50% of the pilots that you know don't make people angry back, and don't create an environment whereby I don't feel safe to go to work. That I can only tell you how he made me feel at the time.
How often do you cross each other's paths?
Since not very often.
And in your day-to-day work, you go and fly a fixed-wing aircraft. He flies a rotary-wing aircraft.
Yes.
Do you have shared locker rooms?
No.
Do you have shared places where you change clothes?
Yes.
And how often do you work the same shift?
I would say...
how many times a week, let's say, would you cross his path?
Maybe 2 to 3.
2 to 3 times a week you cross his path. And how long would you be in his proximity for? In terms of minutes, hours,
that would depend.
seconds?
I mean, if we were sharing a shift, we'd be there 12 hours.
And you'd
together.
be in the same workplace?
We'd be in the same workplace.
And how close together would you be sitting?
Well, that depends. If we were sitting in the lunchroom together, then we'd be very close. Rotor pilots, fixed-wing pilots share a flight planning office. So again, there's close proximity. It's not that big a facility, but...
When was the last time you spent a 12-hour shift with Mr. Wade?
Would have been in July.
In July this year?
Yes.
And the time before that?
Well, there would be several times in July.
Where you work together? We'll save our time.
Okay, very well. We'll move on to the government. Ms. Sandals.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Binderup. How do we pronounce that properly?
It's Binderup, yes.
Binderup? Thank you. There's been a lot of discussion about the letter that you wrote, and just so we can be absolutely clear, I think you've described already that you had a discussion with some of your fellow pilots about whether you should do something. Did anybody ask you to write that letter?
No, absolutely not.
So this was something that you, with the support of some of your fellow pilots, wanted to do. It isn't that somebody came to you and asked you to...
No, absolutely not.
And there's a mention here that you contacted Minister Gravel's office.
Yes.
Would he have been your MPP in Thunder Bay?
He is one of the MPPs in Thunder Bay, yes. I don't think that he's mine, actually. He's in the north end of the city. But I had known of him through a mutual friend.
Okay, so he was one of your area MPPs.
But it wasn't him. It was his assistant, Mr. Larry Joy, that I was actually able to contact.
Okay, so you spoke to Mr. Joy. You didn't actually speak to Mr. Gravel.
That's correct.
And what was the conversation that you had with Mr. Joy?
I indicated to him that we would, as a group of fixed-wing pilots, would like to basically stand behind Minister Deb Matthews because we felt that she had shown some support to us, and so we'd like to return the favor, basically. And how would I go about getting a letter to her or to the committee or to someone to do that, to make that happen?
So you went to Mr. Joy, said we'd like to send a letter, and asked him for our contact information for the committee or the minister or whoever.
Whatever he was able to do, or did he think that was even possible? So,
could we talk a bit about some of the things that you actually did say in your letter then that you sent to the committee?
Sure.
You talk about in your letter that in December of last year you watched as the fabric of the orange machine began to unravel. Can you explain to us what you meant by the fabric of orange beginning to unravel? You're having a poetic flight here, so let's get some specifics.
Yeah. Basically, we watched the same as everybody else did through the newspaper. I guess it was probably the middle of December when things really became open or began to open up, essentially, in the press. And so we watched that happen, just the same as everybody in Ontario did, I guess. Very concerned. I mean, the whole thing seemed to be kind of falling down. So everybody, I think, was concerned initially until it started to sort of take shape, and we can kind of get an idea of what was actually going on and who was being singled out and how that actually took shape.
Okay. One of the other things then that you talked about was an issue that seemed to be part of the conflict maybe between yourself and Mr. Wade, if I can put it that way. And you talked in your letter about there have been issues raised that there are not enough paramedics to staff all the aircraft that Ornge operates. While I cannot speak to optimal staffing levels, I can say that there are many, many cases where the weather precludes the helicopters from being able to respond to a call, where the PC-12 aircraft is subsequently dispatched. And yes, in those cases, and it is often the helicopter medics that are dispatched on the PC-12. For our part, we are there to fly aircraft and respond to the calls of people all over the province of Ontario who may need us. And if we can respond to that call safely, then we do. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Because for those of us who aren't pilots, and actually there are a couple of pilots in the room, but for those of us who aren't actually pilots, it would be helpful if we understood this, when a helicopter can go, when an aircraft can go, and this sort of flow back and forth of paramedics.
Okay. One of the things that I'm going to kind of roundabout answer your question if I could. One of the things that we saw, and I kind of made reference to in that, and I'll back you up a couple of paragraphs where I said that there were people with flawed information. What I was alluding to there, and I guess I didn't maybe say it all that well, but was that people were gathering at that point information on downstaffing, for example. Nobody disagrees that we need paramedics for the helicopter, but what I saw happening was that every time a helicopter couldn't fly, it was being blamed on the one issue. So you can take information, you can take data, and you can spin it however you want. I'll use example for the helicopter in Thunder Bay. They have some pretty strict regulations or guidelines in terms of when they can fly at night. Just due to the aircraft, Transport Canada regulations and whatnot. They basically need essentially VFR conditions, roughly around 3,000 feet, before they can actually go out and fly at night. So if an aircraft or if a helicopter, let's say the weather is down to 1,000 feet and they can't fly, and the helicopter can't do anything, and then the medics go out on the airplane, is it because of the weather or is it because of the lack of paramedics? There are some that would take that information and say, well, the paramedics are gone, that's downstaffed the helicopter. And while that may be, it's all
you
how you...
upstaff the aircraft.
We upstaff the aircraft. Or it's all how you put the spin on it. I want to say, along with that I believe that we should have medics for every aircraft, so that everything, if the weather is good, everything should be able to fly. So my issue wasn't necessarily with the lack of paramedics so much as it was the way that it was being portrayed.
Okay. The email that Ms. Jelena mentioned, which is the email from you to some of your colleagues, I suspect that you're going to get questioned on it more. Would you like to read it into the record and stop and comment on why you wrote what you did? Because I suspect that we're going to have more questions, and when we've got you here, we'll go ahead and tell us what you said and tell us why you said it.
Okay. You want me to read from the top?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, this is again email from myself to my fixed wing pilot group.
Yeah, and you weren't anticipating that it was for public consumption, but it's now been tabled with the committee, so it's now part of the public record.
I trust this email finds everyone well as the summer motor's on. Many of you have been following the legislative hearings in Toronto by the Standing Committee investigating the scandal at Orange.
Slow down a little bit and speak into that microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's all new to me. I trust this email finds everyone well as the summer motor's on. Many of you have been following the legislative hearings in Toronto by the Standing Committee investigating the scandal at Orange. While many of us have been content up to now to watch these on YouTube and smiling, there have been some things developing behind the scenes that I would like everyone to be aware of. Those of you in Thunder Bay are no doubt that Mr. Bruce Wade has been a significant source of information to MPP Frank Klees. And this was, can I just interject as I go?
Yeah, that's what I'd like you to do, is comment on
and
why
Bruce had commented on this numerous times as well. So
you got this information from Mr. Wade himself,
yes,
that he'd been in contact with Mr.
for sure.
Klees.
Mr. Wade has bragged to many of us in Thunder Bay of his relationship to Mr. Klees. He has also made it very clear through verbal altercations with flight crew that he wishes to aid Mr. Klees, and I quote Bruce, in bringing Orange down. No doubt in the hope that Canadian helicopters would come riding to his rescue. Again, comments that he had made as well. I do not wish to comment on this except to say that it's not how I feel. Mr. Wade does not have my support, nor does he represent me in any way. I found out recently that Mr. Wade has been invited by Mr. Klees to appear before the committee to speak on the state of Orange. While I do not know what his testimony will entail, I do not get warm, fuzzy feeling about it. That I can assure you. All of a sudden I realized that the time is now to stand up for ourselves and let someone know how we feel. As Terry, one of my co-workers, mentioned in his email, we are the dirty little secret of Ornge. In fact, when we should be applauded for going out there and making a difference in the lives of Ontarians, we're being shot down and bad-mouthed for stealing medics off the helicopter. Well, folks, I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but I've had enough. Having been a part of this from the very beginning, I am extremely proud of what we have accomplished here, and I'm even more proud of what we do, what I do. I think that we can all say that. When the weather is less than stellar, we are the guys and gals out there making a difference. It's time we stood together and unified as a group of professionals and let people know how we feel. So here's what I've been up to. I spoke with Rob Lindsay, he is our union representative in Thunder Bay, about the union's standpoint on this, specifically how Mr. Wade has been undermining our future employment with Ornge. Thank you, Rob, for following this up with the union. Unfortunately, the union has indicated that it is unable to do anything with respect to Mr. Wade's actions. I have filed a 4 with respect to Mr. Wade's actions and indicated that he is creating a hostile work environment and that this matter is bordering on a safety issue. As human factors go, this is distracting when we should be focusing on our duties. I received a positive response from the Safety Department and would encourage anyone who feels similarly to file such a report or simply send an email to the Safety Department. Lastly, I have started a dialogue with the office of Michael Gravel, the local Liberal MPP here in Thunder Bay. I do not want to get into politics here, but the bottom line is that the current Liberal Minister of Health, Deb Matthews, has been a huge supporter of ours over the last number of months, and I believe it is time to return the favor. I will be drafting a letter to Ms. Matthews, in essence stating how much we appreciate her support. It is also my goal to put some distance between myself and Mr. Wade. I believe that he is a loose cannon and has his own agenda that in no way represents how I feel about my job. People like Ron McCurley and Deb Matthews are the ones on the front lines fighting to keep Ornge alive. It's time we put some ammunition back in the guns of the people who are trying to defend us against the Wades and the Kleeses out there, who are constantly taking pot shots at us and our livelihood. Mr. Wade is scheduled to appear before the committee next Tuesday, and I'm hoping to have a letter together and sent to Deb Matthews' office no later than Monday. I'm also hoping to be able to send the letters to each member of the standing committee. At this time, I'm waiting to hear back from Mr. Gravel's office with contact information and with the most advantageous method of proceeding. I will let you know as things progress. In the meantime, please understand I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. If there's any among you that do not feel as I do or don't want to get involved or just really don't care, that is your prerogative. If you do care, then please put together a letter or simply email me your support. Remember, there is strength in numbers. There are those individuals out there who are fighting to take away my livelihood and put my family on the street. Nobody messes with my family, and you can all consider yourselves my family. Cheers, PE.
Thank you very much. And thank you for taking the initiative, because that's tough to do when you find yourself in a workplace where life has become difficult, and we're kind of used to being at the center of political storms, but when your job is to fly medevac airplanes, you don't really expect to be at the center of a political storm. So thank you for having the courage to take that initiative. You've mentioned your intent here, and when you wrote the actual letter, to note that you'd seen positive changes since Mr. McCurley replaced Dr. Mazza, and the support you've gotten from Minister Matthews. Could you tell us a little bit about the things that you've seen change since December as the world was unraveling? What's going back together?
Okay. Well, even right now, one of the things, and this is just kind of from the outside looking in, to address the paramedic issue, for example. Right now we have 2 classes of paramedics that are being upgraded in certification. One in Toronto, one in Thunder Bay. So I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but I think there's 10 to 12 in Thunder Bay, and I'm not sure in Toronto. That will go a long way to putting more advanced care paramedics into the mix. We've hired a few, at least, paramedics in Thunder Bay. Some of them have been to replace the paramedics that are now on course. So in that respect, we haven't really seen a whole lot of change in terms of the actual staffing levels in Thunder Bay. But again, from the outside looking in, we've done some hiring and we're doing some upgrading. So that's positive
change. And you
change.
anticipate that when the training's complete, then there will be more people on the ground in Thunder Bay?
Well, we've hired enough, I believe, to sort of backfill the ones that are on course. We constantly see emails go out in terms of job postings. I don't know how many of those are responded to, but I mean they certainly are looking for paramedics. And once the courses are complete, then you've got a dozen or more paramedics that are instantly put back into the system as well. So which will again go a long way to staffing. I can't speak to the intent of staffing levels and what the end game is in terms of staffing. We're having some difficulties right now keeping helicopter pilots. And again, they're actively seeking out helicopter pilots. I believe there will be 2, if not 4, rotor pilots coming out of sim this week or next week that will be put into Moosonee, I believe. Don't necessarily quote me on that, but I know that Moosonee is a big issue right now, and staffing, having to downstaff one base to upstaff another. But again, there are pilots being hired. Is it enough? That I can't speak to the actual numbers right now, but again, for me, it's a step in the right direction. Communication has been another big thing. There was a time when if I were to actually send Dr. Mazza an email and jump the chain of command, I would likely lose my job, or at least that would be a fear. I can actually send Mr. McCurley an email, and he's quite likely to respond. We get weekly updates in terms of what's going on in the OCC, what's going on in the rotor world, what's going on with the different departments. So every week we get at least a taste of what's being done to help, what's being done to, again, is it enough? I can't speak to that, but there's certainly steps that are being taken in the right direction to fix some of these problems. So at this stage in the game, for me, that's good news.
Okay. On the other flip side, one of the things that Mr. Klees has said, and I think this was in the House, was, I would not want to be a pilot, I would not want to be a paramedic, and I would not want to be a patient. Knowing the track record of these helicopters, I would take my chances getting from point A to point B with some other means. How would you and your pilot colleagues react when you heard those sorts of comments?
3 minutes left.
All I can say to that really is that in the face of all of this, we take our jobs very seriously. I had a quick look because I was curious. I alluded to it in the letter on the website to see yesterday how many miles we flew between the helicopters and the fixed wing. It was 27,000 statute miles yesterday. Transported 60 patients. That's something to be proud of. Now, I don't know what all those patients were. We're not supposed to know. But I know that every day I go to work, whether the phone rings or not, if somebody out there needs me, I'm gonna go if it's safe to do so. That goes across the board for paramedics, pilots, rotor pilots, fixed-wing pilots. Regardless of everything else, we're very happy to do what we do. That's why we're there. And it is what we do. We're medevac pilots. So.
Well, thank you for doing your job, and we appreciate that for the pilots, regardless of what sort of aircraft they're flying, and the paramedics who are on the ground, that you folks are out there doing your job. And I guess apologies that the administrative levels of Orange have interfered with the good work that you're out there doing every day and dragged you into a hornet's nest that you have no need to be in the middle of. So thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
To the official opposition, Mr. Klees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Binderup, I want to put into context the comments by Ms. Sands. Those comments were made in response to this document here, which was a confidential document that listed numerous incidents where paramedics had to decline critically ill patients because they were incapable of doing basic CPR because of the interior of the AW139. Are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar with the document, yeah.
Does that concern you as someone who is in your profession, that you would have to turn down a patient because the interior of a helicopter would not allow a paramedic to do CPR?
Absolutely. That's an issue.
I would think so. I want to clarify something else as well. The advantage that I have is that every word that is said in the legislature and in this hearing is recorded, as is yours. And I'm sure that your colleagues will observe this hearing right across the province, and they'll be very interested in what you have to say here, as they were when Mr. Wade was here. I have some of that record here, and I can tell you when Mr. Wade came forward, there wasn't a negative thing that Mr. Wade said about fixed-wing pilots, about paramedics. Had a great deal of negative comments to make about the administration at Orange, the lack of proper resourcing, the fact that incidents such as was reported just yesterday by the CBC in Thunder Bay without Orange helicopter, yet one more time. And the reason is understaffing. To Mr. Wade's credit, he was very courageous. I can't tell you the number of times that I spoke with him when he was very hesitant to give us factual information that we could use to make the point, not only here in this committee, but in the legislature, to get the attention, yes, of the government, but also of the administration at Orange to say what is happening is unacceptable. And so I have to tell you, you know, sir, you are a very experienced pilot. I have to believe that you're a pretty strong guy. I think you can stand up for yourself pretty well. I can't understand, I have to admit to you, that you felt compelled to report a fellow colleague for what you've described here as being angry, as being uncooperative, as being offensive. You come across him once or twice a month. I would think you could hold your own. Perhaps even understand that the reason that Mr. Wade is not a happy man is because of the circumstances that he has to face on a very regular basis about not having enough paramedics to respond to a call, because he shares your calling as well. Here's what Mr. Wade said when he was here. First of all, he told us about the problems of understaffing of paramedics. And he was asked the question, are things getting better under the new administration? July 31st, he said this: it's not gotten better from the rotary perspective. From the fixed-wing side, kudos to my colleagues. They're doing great work. Mr. Wade continues to advocate because of what he feels is a patient care issue. I'm concerned about how we got here with you. And I'd like to just follow through on some questions with you. The email that my colleague distributed, that you read into the record, went to your colleagues. Now, you are the flight training captain?
I am one of them, yes.
And approved check pilot?
Yes.
I understand that you're really the person who reports to management as to which one of the pilots, or if you do your check with the pilot, management would take your recommendation as to whether those pilots deserve to stay on or whether they perhaps should be promoted. Is that true?
Not just me and not just for those qualifications.
No, but that is one of your responsibilities, right?
Yes.
And so those people who are on your email list hold you in pretty high regard because, as you say, and your entire email is all about your job. Let's face it. They're going to be concerned about theirs too. And I would think it would be reasonable to assume that any of those colleagues who got that email from you, in which you say that one of their colleagues is conspiring with an MPP to bring down Ornge. Is it fair to say that those people on that distribution list would be somewhat intimidated by that?
No, sir.
Really? You don't think that would concern them at all?
No.
How can you say that?
Because I know those guys and girls. I work very closely with them. I have a very good relationship with them. I am, yes, I'm one of the training captains. I do check rides. We also have outside people do check rides. But I am...
Just one of the guys.
They're my friends. They are colleagues. And no, I would say absolutely not.
Can you share with us what would have emboldened you to ascribe to Mr. Wade the objective of bringing down Ornge?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, you make it very clear in your email.
That was a statement.
That it's Mr. Wade's objective to bring down Ornge, and you ascribed that same objective to me.
Well, that was a statement that he made.
Is there anything in the course of the last number of months that would cause you to think that I, as a member of this committee, as a member of the legislature, who's spent hours and hours trying to determine what went wrong and what it is that we need to do to get things right, that it would be my objective to bring down Ornge?
Not specifically, no.
Thank you. I want to assure you that that is the last thing that any of us here want to do. The reason that we spend hours and hours and hours on this file is because what we want to do is ensure that people like yourself, whether it's on the fixed wing or the rotor wing, whether it's paramedics or anyone else on the front line, is properly resourced so that we determine what went wrong and that we can ensure that it'll never happen again and that we can restore confidence in our air ambulance service. And it'll be up to us to determine what the best go-forward strategy is going to be. That's our objective here. And I would suggest that everything I've heard there, it hasn't been a witness that's come forward that hasn't expressed that same objective. Now, I will say this, that the timing seemed somewhat questionable of your email that went out to all of your colleagues. 2 days later, we get a letter here, and it just so happens to be 24 hours before Bruce Wade is testifying. Is that just coincidence? Or was there an intention on your part to send a signal, as you said in your email, you're going to take it upon yourself, you're going to do something about it, and you're going to separate yourself from Wade, and you're going to send a strong message? Was that the intent?
Yes, it was. My intent with the letter was to present a group of pilots that felt differently. And again, it's my sentiment towards Mr. Wade was based on what he said at work and how he said it. So I wasn't drawing conclusions. Many of the pilots have heard him make those statements. So, and yeah, it made us quite concerned.
Mr. Zimmer, it's okay. I will.
Thank you, Chair.
Please.
I thought you were finished. Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. Mr. Wade today is suspended.
Yes.
In large part because of your actions of filing a grievance against him. An investigation is underway.
Yes.
We raised the issue in the legislature today that his suspension came within hours of him testifying here. You yourself admitted that your letter, your email, his testifying, all were interlinked.
The timing was absolutely awful.
While the timing in one sense was awful, for sure, in the other it certainly achieved a certain objective, didn't it?
I had absolutely no objective in terms of having Mr. Wade suspended. That was not my wish.
Well, what were you, if you didn't want him to be suspended, what was your objective in signing a grievance?
The grievance was, ultimately, I wanted somebody to take him aside and say...
Chair, no, perhaps we should have a copy of the grievance so that we all know what...
We already filed for it.
We've passed a resolution asking for that. Mr. Zimmer, continue, Mr. Please.
Please continue.
Okay, sorry. I thought
so your objective, you filed a grievance. What was your objective?
Was for somebody. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah,
was
is
for
it not
somebody,
true that the purpose of of your filing the grievance was to silence Mr. Wade, to shut him down because he was complaining about what was going on?
Appropriate line of
Mr. Zimmer, if you can please just...
It's a reasonable conclusion, right?
No.
We don't have the grievance in front of us.
Mr.
No, we will allow the questioning, please. Continue.
Mr.
The substance of the grievance was, and then that'll help us to understand the...
When you get to ask question, ask him.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. Please.
Well, why don't you tell him what the
Mr. Zimmer, can you please...
Okay.
You don't have to listen to Mr. Zimmer. He'll have his time. I'm
Okay.
asking the questions.
Okay. I wanted somebody to take Mr. Wade aside and say, Bruce, you're making people angry. Please stop it.
And so it was
Ultimately,
for the purpose of silencing him.
I wanted him... I have conversations all the time with paramedics, with maintenance engineers from Canadian that have radically different opinions from me. We're able to sit down or stand in the hangar and have conversations about it. At the end of the day, we agreed to disagree. I was not in any way able to have a conversation with Mr. Wade. It was very hostile. Every encounter with him was very hostile.
We have some people like that in the legislature here.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But we don't go about filing grievances. However, when you wrote your letter, were you advised by Mr. Gravel's office that the Minister of Health would be appearing at the committee the same time that Mr. Wade was going to be here?
No.
Were you advised that the letter would be read at the committee?
I honestly had no idea where it would go. I just sent it.
Did anyone at any time ever tell you that the intimidation of a witness is an offense under the Criminal Code of Canada?
I wasn't, in my mind, intimidating anybody.
Sure, that's entirely inappropriate. The implication is that this person is trying to intimidate
Mr. Zimmer, just...
and you rein Mr. Klees in. That's entirely inappropriate and scandalous.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. I think it takes...
Okay, yes, Mr. Klees, if you can not lead the witness, that would be appreciated.
Well, I'll try not to lead the witness. I'm just simply trying to tell you what seems to be apparent to a lot of people who are observing what took place. As you say, it may be an unfortunate timing, but the reality is we have a circumstance where Mr. Wade was complaining about what was happening at Orange. He was concerned about understaffing. He was making recommendations. He was coming here 2 days before he was scheduled to be here. You send out your email to 40 of your colleagues saying that you're going to separate yourself from Wade. You've had enough with him. Now we get the letter read at the committee hours before Mr. Wade is here. In fact, he's sitting in the audience listening to it being read. Would that be intimidating? It would be intimidating to me, and I'm just simply saying, and Mr. Zimmer knows well, that intimidation of a witness is
Chair, that's inappropriate.
Inappropriate, and it is illegal.
Mr. Zimmer, just, I would like, Mr. Zimmer, if you can be quiet for a moment, please. I would just clarify that the committee has asked for information to determine if intimidation has occurred, but there's been no conclusion by the committee that intimidation has occurred.
Well, that's right, and I think I'm entitled to my opinion about that, and we'll have to see what happens. My point simply is that is how this is being perceived. And Mr. Binderup, I'm just saying to you that we appreciate you coming forward. We appreciate you coming forward. And you see Mr. Zimmer, who is trying to drown out the facts of what has happened. And there's a reason for that. They were very quick to read your letter that praises the minister when we challenged the circumstance under which that letter was presented to this committee. He can't keep quiet. Now, I understand that because I'm used to heckling in this place. But unfortunately, you're not. So, Mr. Binderup, here's how I'd like to leave this with you. There's a man who, today, is suspended. And from what I can conclude, the reason that he is suspended, is not working today, and is under investigation, is because you took issue with the fact that he was expressing his concerns, and yes, obviously in a passionate way. And my question to you is that what your intention was?
Let me answer your question with a question.
Please.
Had this gone just a little bit differently, and the union been able to do what I was hoping that they would be able to do with the grievance, or if that's what it was, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I would have sent the letter anyway, but the issue between Mr. Wade and myself would have been resolved either through union channels or through the company itself. The fact that it has gone to an investigation, and it has gone so far as to they've gone so far as to suspend Mr. Wade with pay. That I had no control over that. So it could have gone very differently.
Yeah, you don't blame us for drawing the conclusion that the reason for the suspension was more because of Mr. Wade's
Cleese,
testimony
remember,
rather than anything else.
Mr. Cleese, it's your opinion. Please don't say us being the committee.
Well, I think some of us on the committee probably agree.
Go ahead.
Okay. And can I just ask this, Mr. Binderup? Would you agree that this wouldn't be an issue? Mr. Wade would not be suspended today. You would not have filed a grievance had the issue been different. If those bases, and specifically the Thunder Bay base, was properly staffed, if Mr. Wade did not have to agonize over the fact that calls come in to respond to a call, there are no paramedics to respond to the call, that is really the issue. That the issue is the underfunding or the understaffing at that Thunder Bay base. That's really the problem. And who we should be focusing on is in fact the Minister of Health, who you praised, to say, Minister, we've got a problem. Staff us up. Get us up to the point where not only the fixed wing division of Orange can do their job, but let's ensure that the rotary wing side of our operation is also able to do their job. That's the problem. The problem is not Mr. Wade. The problem is the Ministry of Health, who after all this length of time still has bases that are understaffed. Would you agree with that?
No.
You don't agree that there are bases that are understaffed?
I agree with that 100%, but I don't think that's the point you're trying to make. My problem with Mr. Wade was his behavior. Now, maybe that behavior was brought on by the issues. I can't speak to that. I don't know Bruce that well, and I will grant you that he is a very passionate individual. But my issue with Mr. Wade was brought on, and my situation, this whole situation was brought on by his actions, not the issues directly at Orange.
So you yourself agree that it didn't merit a suspension, is what you said earlier.
That was not my goal.
That wasn't
Certainly,
your goal.
that wasn't something I wanted.
Do you think a suspension was deserved?
I can't speak to that. I wouldn't have wanted that. If somebody had asked me in the beginning, that wouldn't have been one of my choices.
Mr. Binderup, thank you.
Very well, thank you. And unless the government wants to use their 30 seconds. 22. No, you have, okay, we have 5 minutes left. So you will split that evenly, because you've already used about 22 minutes. So go ahead.
The first question I want to ask you is that before coming to testify today, did you talk to anybody in Orange management?
I did speak with a couple of folks in our communications department. What's that?
Who were they?
James McDonald.
Yeah.
And mostly James. I did speak very briefly with Jennifer Tracy as well.
Jennifer Tracy?
Yeah. Really, Jennifer, it was more just to let her know that I had been invited. James and I talked briefly. I wanted to try and get an idea of the flavor of how the committee hearings were going. So just to try and get a lay of the land, if you will.
You made reference to having a contact with Minister Scrivel or Minister Scrivel's office staff. Who is this contact, and how did you come to have contact with Minister Scrivel's office?
The gentleman that I talked to was Mr. Larry Joy. That was the only contact that I had.
How do you know Larry?
I don't know him, actually, but I know somebody that worked for him. It was a friend of mine from Nova Scotia that gave me his name. So.
Do you know Mr. McCurley?
I've met him a couple of times. I wouldn't say that I know him, but I have met him a couple of times, yes.
Okay. Do you know anybody within the Liberal Party?
No.
That you are friends with? No.
No.
Go.
What about Minister Matthews, Deb Matthews? Do you have any contact with her, or do you know anyone in her office?
None whatsoever. I've never spoken with her.
And Mr. McCurley, how many times have you met him?
Including today, twice.
And when did you meet him today?
And we'll move to the
this morning.
government for a minute of questioning. Mr. Zimmerman.
This morning.
Yes. Thank you. I just want to confirm again from your letter that the following phrase that you've used in your letter is a direct quote from Mr. Wade, and I'll read the sentence to you again. He, referring to Wade, has also made it very clear through many verbal altercations with flight crew that he wishes to aid Mr. Klees in, quote, bringing Orange down, end of quote. That's a quote that you heard Mr. Wade say.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And for the last 30 seconds
And
of
the
your
other
question
thing that I just want to double check with you, when I look at your email to your colleagues, it's dated the 27th of July.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at the language, you say, I filed an FOOR past tense with respect to Mr. Wade and indicated that he is creating a hostile work environment.
Yes.
I understand from that your complaint, your grievance, was with respect to the workplace atmosphere. It
Yes.
was not with respect to his testimony, because he didn't give his testimony till later that week.
Well, that's true. The four came out certainly before the letter and before the testimony.
So it was relevant to what was already happening in the workplace, not about the testimony.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
We
Thank
shall
you.
move to Mr. Cleese for the last 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Mr. Binderup, you mentioned that you met with Mr. McCurley this morning.
Yes.
Was that at his request?
No, sir. I went to the head office because I had some time to kill before coming here.
What did you discuss with Mr. McCurley?
I didn't discuss anything. I shook his hand, and
Pardon?
I shook his hand, and he said, "Good luck."
Good luck?
Yes.
What did he mean by that?
I'm not sure.
And that was it?
That was it. It was,
Did you meet with anyone else there?
at Orange Head Office?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. McDonald.
Okay.
And I'd never been in the facility there yet, so I got a little bit of a grand tour. And
Did you show anyone there your script that you used here in
No,
terms
not
of
at all.
preparation?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Very well, and thank you very much for coming before the committee today. It's appreciated. We are adjourned.